Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of People in Policy, where we talk about political events and policies and how they affect you and everyone around you, and sometimes the entire world. So, I know I said we, but today it is just me, Valina, because Ari's not here. She's on vacation, and I couldn't get a sub. So, it's just me alone. So, I'm going to preface this by saying this might be a shorter episode. I'm not completely sure. We'll see how it ends up. But yeah, it's just me talking. I'm not really discussing with anyone. So, there's a chance that it could be shorter. But another thing that I wanted to say as a disclaimer is that I know that sometimes, as in our episodes, we forget or we just don't mention sources that we use. And I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we do have a works cited page or a works cited doc, and you can definitely find it in our Instagram bio. And I will definitely try to put it into the YouTube description. And if I can, into the Spotify description. I'm not really sure how that one works, but I'll see what I can do. But just letting you know that you have access to all of our sources. It's basically a list of each episode and our sources that we used for that episode. And yeah, so you have access to that as a viewer. And if you want to know our sources, you can see that it's some of them are center leading, most of them are center leading. Some of them are left, some of them are right, but we try to capture all perspectives in our sources. Um, so it's pretty updated. You can go and look at that. Hopefully, I'll have all of the sources from this episode on there by the time this is uploaded. So today's topic is the big beautiful bill. I'm talking about taxes. That's most of what this is. Um, Me personally, my opinion on taxes, I think it's kind of like complaining about the weather, because like the weather is something that you can't change, and at the same time everyone goes through it. Like, yes, I know that it's hot outside. I'm experiencing it too. But at the same time, there are always exceptions because, like, what if you're in a room or a car with AC in it? Then not everyone is experiencing it. But at the same time, what's the reason to complain? Same with taxes. I feel like, obviously, unless you're a child, you still have to pay taxes. But I guess it does vary between each person. But everyone has to pay it. So, and you can make changes to it, I guess, but not necessarily anything that you as just an individual can do. So, what do? Don't complain. Let me tell you. So many people do. Everyone's complaining. The problem is that it's not just one person who's complaining. The one person or the like group of people who have to pay taxes. It's everyone because everyone has to pay taxes. So it's very very overwhelming. But it might get worse. I don't know. It depends because that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the big beautiful bill. It's basically if you compiled every single superhero and every single supervillain into one movie and had them fight, and maybe they don't realize that their actions have consequences on the people around them and the average people. Same with these laws. These lawmakers, they're this is going to have consequences for everyone. And I'm not saying they're negative or positive. Actually, there are a lot of positive things that come with this, but that's what we're talking about today. Is it big? Yes, definitely. Like I said, if you go on congress.org, you can see like all of the sections of it. It's very long. It's basically it's everything compiled together. It's talking about tax cuts, it's talking about federal spending and federal spending increases and decreases. It's everything. And it's something that affects everyone. So, yes, it's definitely big. Beautiful, you can tell me. Beneficial for the American people, you know, that's something that we'll figure out today as we go on. So basically, this bill it's actually called the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's not as catchy as I thought it was. It's the one. You could have called it BBB, Big Beautiful Bill, but we had to add the one in there, which is a quote. So that's crazy. I don't know. But it was signed into law on July 4th, 2025. Very patriotic, big celebration after. And it will go into effect this upcoming year. So in 2026, when you file for taxes, that's when it will be going on. But most of the deductions that are available with it will expire starting after 2028. So we don't have it for such a long period of time. It depends on which policy in it you're talking about and which, section of it we're talking about, but most of that is how it works. So it'll go into effect later on. But it'll also expire very close to that date. So you get it for 2 years. Be happy. And as it said in the name, it just gathers changes that would otherwise be split into multiple other bills, puts them all together, and it's bringing significant changes for employees, employers, businesses, individuals, and it brings changes to taxes and benefits and national spending. So that's what we'll be talking about. So starting with the taxes part, the bill adopts deductions to federal tax rates that will adjust with inflation each year. So it's definitely like predictable, I guess. If it depends on if inflation's super good or super bad, and just whatever those rates are. And it's kind of a continuation from the president's first term when he came up with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which first of all, it put a cap on deductions for state and local taxes of $10,000. With this new bill, that cap has changed and it's going up to $40,000. This allows deductions to be much higher than previous years, and the cap will revert back to $10,000 in 2030. So, like I said, not everything will expire in 2028, but 2030. And for those with a modified adjusted gross income of more than $500,000, your deductions are going to be lower. They're going to phase lower just because you're making more money than some people. And yeah, so it's just raising the amount of deductions or the amount that you can get from tax deductions, which is kind of a plan that's been a long time coming. And along with this, there are some other things. The act until 2028 will temporarily provide for a $6,000 annual tax deduction for taxpayers aged 65 or older. It also includes a tax deduction for qualified overtime and qualified tips that only applies federally. And the overtime deduction is limited to $12,500 or $25,000 if you're filing jointly as a married couple. And it only applies to the premium pay of overtime. So, for example, if you make $10 an hour and then you work overtime and you're making $15 an hour overtime, then your tax deduction will only apply to that like extra $5 of premium pay that you're getting working overtime. Both tips and overtime deductions are effective retroactive to January 1st, 2025. It also establishes this new thing called Trump accounts, which are basically savings accounts that are tax advantaged, and they're for people that are under 18 years old. So if you're a parent or a family member or an organization who wants to put money into this under 18-year-olds saving account, then they'll have that saving account and then they can start withdrawing money once they're 18 or older. So it's tax exempt, I guess, and taxpayers have to put the money into it, but then that 18-year-old will get the money out once they turn of age. Yeah, so I don't know, go get a Trump account today if you want. Can you do that? Probably not. I said it went into effect later on. So, along with this, there's also a tax credit of up to 25% on childcare expenses for employees. That's pretty good if you're an employee with a child. There's also a paid family and medical leave tax credit. And there are some more, but those are some important ones to highlight. Along with this is also bringing some federal spending cuts and federal spending increases. So some cuts that we'll be looking at are cuts for Medicaid. And kind of to explain the process of taxes to you, some people don't understand this, but your taxes are going towards multiple different programs and different things like that. So even if you don't use things like Medicaid or like SNAP, your taxes are going towards obviously the people that do use those and to those programs and to the military and things like that, and to your state and to the United States. And that's what they're going towards. And they're also going towards you and your benefits. Also, they go towards things like construction and things like that. So if there's a pothole in the road that you don't like, if there are tax decreases and you're paying less taxes, there's a likelihood that that might not be filled in because you're not paying taxes for that thing to happen. So that's basically how taxes work somewhat. I'm not a taxpayer currently, but that is some of what I know. And So some cuts will be to Medicaid, partly because taxes are going to be lower and overall we're just slashing our funding for Medicaid. So that's going to bring about a lot of changes for families and for anyone who relies on it. Along with this, there's also going to be slashes and cuts to food benefits with new reforms for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And as someone who's used SNAP before and who also knows people who need it, then I understand why that could be a problem and why that might be kind of harsh to hear. And it's something you definitely have to adjust to, which is going to be hard for some families and some children. It's currently a program that's fully funded by the federal government, and so there are reforms to that with it being partly funded by states. Um, Another thing is the tax or the spending increases. So, based on what President Trump has done in his first term and has promised with his campaign, he's promised to crack down on immigration and also just strengthen our military and our borders and our seas and our skies. So there's a $150 budget, or $150 billion, big difference, $1 billion budget increase for the military and increased funding for the immigration and customs enforcement. So that's working towards keeping our borders safe, but at the same time, as we've talked about earlier in our past episodes, talking about the travel ban or talking about the LA protests, we talked a lot about those ICE raids and our treatment of immigration so far and currently, and what's planned for that. So you'll likely see a rise in deportations and things like that, anything related to immigration, as we keep funding and increase funding for immigration enforcement. And along with that, we'll have a better military as we increase the budget for that. So now we'll be talking about why this bill was passed, because I know I brought up some good things, some bad things. So looking into why it was passed, how it was passed. It's basically an enactment of the promises that were made by President Trump in his first term and kind of a continuation of his earlier policies, along with some things that he said in his campaign, like cracking down on immigration and things like that, and using our spending to go towards certain programs and less towards other programs, and also a lot towards tax cuts. So that's part of it. Obviously, it's also a modification of tax cuts that were first enacted by Trump. Making it into a mega bill. It's efficient, right? It's a simpler process. Maybe not to go through for all the voting because it is a lot to look at, but overall, it just makes big changes very fast. So, if that's what was intended, that's why it was passed. And it was definitely a hard thing to get passed because a lot of people were on edge about it, right? Everyone was on edge about it. And it was hard to get it passed in the House and the Senate because Republicans and Democrats alike all found it kind of obviously it's a difficult thing to understand. It's a lot to process. And there are obviously suspicions and disagreements over it, and estimation or estimated amounts that it could, or things that it could cause. So some repercussions that come along with it and with all of the tax cuts, because tax cuts, they come with repercussions. They're good for us and they're good for anyone who wants them, but they come with their own repercussions. So that's what we'll talk about. Talking about the past perspectives and the current perspectives now that it has been passed. So there was always suspicion and disagreement over this bill, and some believe that it could do more harm than good. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the bill could add $3.3 trillion to federal deficits, which adds on to the national debt that we have and things like that. And there's also some good, according to the Tax Foundation, and there's overall some good and some bad and things like that that come along with this bill. Most policies align with the Tax Foundation's principle of stability, meaning that things are predictable, right? They're not going to fluctuate too much unless it's with going along with inflation. So it's definitely something that you can predict for at least until the end of the president's term. And there's also bad regarding the fact that some taxpayers may not be treated equally. I know we can see that age is taken into account along with, those that rely on SNAP are likely to be low income, so maybe they're taken into account a little less since there have been slashes in the funding for programs like that, programs for people in need. So I think we can see who may be negatively impacted in this situation by these tax cuts. And there's a chance of inequality there, and that's how some people feel about this bill. Um, and along with that, there's also for different industries, not only looking at the right and the left, but looking at different industries and how they're impacted by this. The artificial intelligence industry is pretty happy about this. They're pretty proud this was passed because um, companies that break ground on chip making for AI may be eligible for a 10% higher tax credit. Before this, it was 25% for their tax credits. Now it's 35%, or will be. So that's pretty good for them if they keep making those chips, they keep producing for AI. So I guess that's something that this bill is in support of compared to like medical school students who are concerned because with this bill, it also comes with a cap on the amount that students can borrow in loans. And for medical school, it can be around $300,000. It depends on your school. It depends on what you're studying. But some caps are for $100,000, other for $200,000, and $300,000 is a lot, but it's a number that some students have to pay, and they're not able to with this cap. So we are likely going to see some debt for those students, along with a continuing shortage in the amount of people joining the medical field and that profession because they can't get the studies for it. They can't finish and get their degree because they can't pay for it. So that is something that's taken into importance. But everyone's equally confused, right? They're on edge about this bill just because it is a little concerning, and though it does come with tax cuts come with a lot of repercussions. They come with like it is cutting taxes, which means it's cutting so much funding and so much revenue that could be going towards so many different programs in the United States. And yeah, that's why your taxes are so high, but that means that everyone here is getting helped out by the money that you're putting in and the money that everyone is pulling together. And when we're losing that revenue, we also lose the programs, and it can cause harm in communities, in families, and in children, and in everyone. So kind of looking at how does this impact the average American, those Americans that rely on SNAP and Medicaid, and low income Americans, this can really hurt them. Um, However, there's obviously every single American is going to experience those tax deductions, and they're going to see that, um, which will be good overall. But we're also going to see those spending decreases. Along with that, also, like if you're part of the military, you might be happy to see maybe there's more equipment and there's more technology and there's more benefits for you guys because there's a larger budget for it, better pay, or things like that. Same with if you're an immigration worker. So those spendings are going to help the workers in certain industries out, and then the people who are impacted or who rely heavily on certain programs, certain like benefit programs, it's going to hurt them too. So it's going to hurt K through 12 students because in schools like that, sometimes they rely partly on things like Medicaid or SNAP for like certain revenue that the school collects. And now we're going to lose that too. And also some funding towards schools. So that's definitely going to be a struggle. I think we can see that certain industries, certain businesses, certain people are going to be negatively impacted while others are going to be positively impacted. And that's a little bit of the uncertainty that's going on, is that there are, inequalities in this bill. But this is definitely something that we've talked about that is going to affect everyone. I mean, unless you're youth, which is what we're aimed at educating here, but give your parents a pat on the back because obviously it depends on the parent, but they're going through it with these new tax things, or they will be going through it in these upcoming years, as they start doing their taxes in the year and have to fill in all these deductions. It's going to be a lot more complicated, I will say that, because when you put in all of these deductions, filing for deductions for like overtime and tips, that's a lot more papers that you have to fill out. And it's good that you get a tax deduction, but it's just so much work. I don't know. I don't experience it because I don't have to do that. But for all of you guys with parents out there, give them a pat on the back when they're doing their taxes, But overall, this is definitely something that's going to affect everyone. And like I said, those who are specifically probably low income are going to see those impacts as being maybe negative, or, you know, those receiving less tax cuts may also view it as negative. And if you're liking these tax cuts and you're not necessarily impacted by the slashes that we've put in funding, then you may see the positive effects of that, and that'll be good. But yeah, that's basically the rundown of the big beautiful bill. And maybe this could have been longer if I had Ari here, but that is everything that it's involved with, and that's how it'll impact you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Tune into next episode where I'll actually be talking with another person, but it was great talking with you guys as an audience. And thank you so much for watching or listening. Bye.